Great. I look forward to doing that then, and I look forward to listening to you and Larry interview one of my close friends, Eric Topol, in the next session.
Well, hang on and say hello to Eric. I know you two know each other well, and we are delighted to have Eric Topol, somebody who needs no introduction. And Larry, do take it away. You're going to get us started with Eric.
Well, thank you very much.
Say goodbye,
Eric, from the western edge of the continent where I am. Eric needs no introduction, but he does need an introduction because he's an extraordinary presence in American medicine. Eric's a fully trained cardiologist and has made incredible contributions to the field of cardiology. But over his career, and highly pertinent to today's discussion, Eric is one of the great communicators of science, and we've learned during the pandemic that we cannot communicate science and the value of science enough, even to people who use science all the time with their magnificent devices to criticize science. But getting back to Eric's career, he's a member of the National Academy of Medicine, elected a long time ago. He's the editor-in-chief of Medscape. He's the executive vice president of the Scripps Research Institute. Many of you on the call have heard of Harvard and Stanford, but per capita, I believe that Scripps has the highest per capita winner of Nobel Prizes, including this year's Nobel Prize in Medicine. So Eric's a fantastic communicator, and we have the privilege at Metabesity of really interrogating Eric's mind and asking him what he has to say about metabesity, obesity, exercise, and a variety of other topics. I can kick it off perhaps with a question to you, Eric. And what are your thoughts about the major chronic diseases and the aging process being driven by shared biochemical pathways, and perhaps with shared pharmaceutical solutions, as well as lifestyle interventions to help remedy these problems?
Well, thanks, Larry. It's good to be with you and Zan. Thanks for the invitation and your kind introduction. And also, I very much enjoyed the last panel with my friend Jay and all the great group that you assembled there. You know, I think the point you're making about chronic diseases and how they track with aging is notable, and how it takes, because we have, you know, genomic risk for various conditions, but it takes often till the 5th or 6th, 7th decade to start to see those manifest. If there is a common thread, the aging process is certainly pivotal. And so that's why I think so many studies have reinforced that if we could modulate aging in a favorable way, its impact would be so profound and broad, because it would have a salutary effect across the most common diseases of man. So no question, this is an area that's fertile for not just a twofer, but, you know, a 5-fer or a 7-fer in terms of a potential impact.
Eric, we're just thrilled that you're with us. It's a great honor to have you. You are famous for walking, if not running the talk, let's say, about staying fit. And I wonder if you might even give us some of your own advice about what you do to stay fit.
Yeah, well, thanks, Zan. I mean, I have tried to, throughout my life, be, you know, very into exercise, and the only thing that hampered me is knee osteoarthritis from a congenital condition that led to a knee replacement back 5 years ago, which was actually quite complicated. So my activities are more limited, and now biking is the main thing every day, you know, and also hikes and walks. But I used to love to run and do a lot of other things. But, I just, it's limited. But I do almost every day get at least 30 minutes, if not more, of, pretty intense physical exercise. And I don't know, it's basically, I feel like if I haven't done it, even though oftentimes it's hard to think about doing it, but if I haven't, I feel like, I've really missed out on the day. So that's been my routine. And I've always advocated that with patients and really spent a lot of time during a visit as to try to find the niche or the way that each person could get at least 5 days of aerobic exercise a week. And I think, it's possible in almost everyone, but it's like finding the right time, finding the right type of, exercise, and also making it somehow fun, whether it's with music or television or some kind of combination, because otherwise, of course, it can be, not something you want to do every day.
I think you bring up a good point. And while we're on the subject of exercise, that many, and you'll hear it a little bit or a lot in this conference, advocate the pharmaceutical approach, and they're not mutually exclusive, obviously, but it's been said that if everyone just took a statin and just took some metformin, everything would be fine. A little bit north of you at Scripps, there's one of the most magnificent researchers who develops a pill that might even replace exercise. But it's extraordinary the multiple benefits of exercise. As a neurologist, I never would have guessed that exercising your muscles has a tremendous impact on brain health. And the fact that these organ systems are so intimately connected is remarkable. Any reflections on that?
Right, Larry. Well, you're bringing up the work of Ron Evans from the Salk Institute, the exercise and a pill. I've always thought it's too good to be true, because it just can't be that easy, right? And obviously that's worked very well in animal models, but we've yet to see that pill be transformative in people. And I'm obviously suspect, but I'd love to see it work, because there are people that, can't exercise or unwilling, and this would be a nice remedy, but we just don't have that nailed down. Your point is really, I think, an important one regarding the role of exercise in delaying cognitive decline. I think, of all the studies of Alzheimer's disease, the one thing we can take away is that cardiovascular fitness helps to prevent that decline of neurodegenerative conditions. So, there is something to it. And I think that's something that we all should keep in mind about, the prescription for exercise can't be emphasized enough, because there are so many merits, of course, that extend, whether it's for metabesity or neurodegenerative diseases, and on and on.
I think this also gets to an important issue about if we had predictive tests, and we have a lot of predictive tests, a lot of us, and I can almost speak for myself as a well-informed medical scientist, that I don't want to know something unless there's a safe and effective solution. And if we're thinking of it in terms of a pharmaceutical, that gets into some immensely complex questions. If there were an effective drug for Alzheimer's that was perfectly safe, it's one thing. But if we have this fundamental basis that if we eat well and exercise well, we can do more than most of the pharmaceuticals that are currently available and may be available in the future. And it provides some very interesting lessons, I think, about the big incentive in pharmaceuticals is you can help people and make a lot of money. Exercise, you can't make a lot of money on exercise. And I think this is problematic as a way of really informing the world that this is as important as anything you'll ever do. Get some exercise.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And I also want to extend that to the nutrition world as well. So we don't have a individualized diet. It doesn't exist. We just have recommendations, for everyone. And I think you know that the NIH is making a big investment in this whole individualized diet story. It's complicated because what it requires is not just, whole genome and a gut microbiome and taking pictures of everything you eat for a stretch and having prepared meals. We're in the midst of a study of 1,000 people like this, both with type 2 diabetes and healthy, to try to find out an algorithm it's individualized to help people guide them for the type of diet that leads to the most ideal glucose homeostasis, which is, of course, just one endpoint. But I think that is the future, is taking advantage of what people are eating to help guide them, along with other multidimensional data that we should be able to prevent conditions someday. This is going to take more than just deep learning. This is going to take models that don't even exist to process these data, because it requires, sensors and all these other layers of data continually being processed to give feedback both to the person as well as potentially to the clinician. But I think that's where we're headed. And to me, that's complicated, but it's worth the effort, because you are what you eat sort of story is very much underdeveloped and so darn important.
I couldn't agree more, Eric.
One of the leaders in the fast food area has something called a value meal. And at the time of life when adults are busiest and often trying to raise their economic status, they're also raising children. And it becomes convenient to go to a fast food to feed the family quickly and relatively inexpensively. We're going to have in Metabesity representatives from the food industry. And one of the big breakthroughs will be to work with the food industry to make value meals valuable for health and valuable for the fast food industry itself. The fast food industry can feed people quickly and efficiently. And for busy parents with young families, this is essential. And it's during that time period where obesity can actually begin at the pediatric level and become a lifelong problem.
No, I'm in full agreement. The only thing I would just modify is what's valuable as a diet for one person may be different than another. So, for example, we have a lot of people that are really into these diets for ketosis. These are diets, of course, that you're very familiar with, carbohydrate free, oftentimes, high in fat. And some people do really well with that. Others, it's really bad. And that's just one example of so many of the different diets that are out there that are popular, that guidance, for individuals before they go into that could be helpful. As a cardiologist, again, I get worried when I know people that are following diets that might be having an adverse consequence, but we still have so much to learn here. So it's great that you're partnering with the food industry, because I think that's a segue to learning how to do this right.
Eric, coming back to the pharmaceutical approach, and certainly we agree the basics should be used first, but there may be a role for pharmaceuticals. And over the course of your career, over 3 decades, you've been in the thick of the good, bad, and ugly. You've been key to identifying cardiovascular safety issues, as well as helping to develop therapies for cardiovascular disease prevention and other important areas. So what are some of the lessons that you have learned over your career that might be applicable to this moonshot project of developing agents, whether they're regulated or not, for trying to prevent multiple chronic diseases?
Right. Well, I think it is like if there ever was a moonshot in the biopharma world, that would be it. And I think it's laudable that it's being pursued. There are companies, anti-aging companies, like Calico and others that are going after this. But I think the key here is we've learned ad nauseum that it's pretty easy to change the natural history of animal models, whether it's a worm or a mouse, in terms of fostering enhanced lifespan. But I think what we haven't seen yet is compelling evidence in humans. And so it's really important that the industry, when they go after this, is reserved about their enthusiasm, because it's probably going to be very hard to achieve this goal. And it's something that will probably have more impact than almost any prior pharmaceutical agent. But I think it's very hard, of course. I mean, this is something that it's been contemplated for a long time, probably millennia, and we're not there yet. So we should be very circumspect about any announcements until they are, really validated, replicated, and it's the real deal. I think that's one of the problems we've had surrounding this field, is a lot of premature exuberance or enthusiasm when there's just not enough there to really make the call.
Eric, what
So
lessons has the pandemic taught us that may be relevant to the moonshot projects that we're contemplating for longevity?
Yeah, that's a really important point you're making, Larry, is that there had never been a vaccine developed from identifying the pathogen to having it through randomized trials and demonstrating efficacy, no less, efficacy at the level of 95% against infection, symptomatic infection. To see that all compressed in less than a year, basically, in 10 months, gives us a whole new view of what can be achieved quickly, instead of the average of 17 years from ideation to an innovation that's proven. And the average time for the successful vaccines has been between 8 and 11 years. And here, we needed this. The existential threat to millions of people was on the line. And the companies came through and did this, of course, with some getting support from the government here. So I think that is perhaps, to me, the most momentous chapter in life science, in medicine. That's really a biomedical triumph. The sad part is the lack of complete adoption in the US population, and how we're ranked around number 50 in the world when we should be ranked number 1 and showing the rest of the world how to do this. But nonetheless, it's helping. And obviously there are other vaccines that came along quickly as well. I also think, going back to Zan's question, even though I've never had a very good relationship with Merck since the Vioxx days, their ability to bring this pill, which they just today filed for emergency use authorization. I call it an MPAC because it's hard to say the name, but that pill that reduced mortality and hospitalizations by 50%. We haven't seen the data yet, of course, just the press release. But that, I think, is another notable advance, because there are going to be breakthroughs. We know that, particularly in people of advanced age. And we also know there's still a lot of people who are unwilling to get vaccinated. To have a pill, a remedy that could be widely available, is going to be a big boom for this dealing with the pandemic. So, we were very much vaccine centric from the point a year ago when we were imminent to have these trials released. But the pill story is also very important. So I think the lessons from the pandemic are that we can do this. This is something that usually it's a very slow process. Just think where we'd be right now without the vaccines. And if it really took 8 years, or in many programs, there had never been a success. And only recently are we seeing that turned around for malaria. after, since 1880 when the parasite was identified, or with HIV, which has been, 38 years, we're starting to see an HIV vaccine that may come to life because of mRNA as a platform. So it's exciting. It tells me that the biopharma industry may be moving into a zone that's more high velocity, higher chance for success. And the mRNA nanoparticle story is one that we shouldn't take as just another small thing. I think it's actually just an enormous ability to deliver molecular medicine. So we may see that across the board, and not just infectious diseases, autoimmune diseases, cancer, even neurodegenerative diseases. So that, I think, is a whole new entry for this industry.
And you've mentioned one of Larry's favorite subjects, nucleic acid plasmids, and their potential for a number of therapeutic applications. But also, as you well know, Eric, the pandemic has revolutionized how we do clinical trials, and that's going to hold true for virtually every therapeutic area.
Yes, I think there's two parts to that story, Zan. One is, getting the clinical trials. The US has never done a very good job with that, but we learned, of course, again, from the UK with the recovery trials, how you could get, 10,000 people in a trial and get the answer fast, simple trials. And that's how we learned very quickly about dexamethasone, for example, and also got, a readout on other drugs that didn't have such efficacy, like remdesivir or hydroxychloroquine and others. So we have not done that well. What we did do well, as I think you're alluding to, is the vaccine trials of getting 30, 40, 50,000 people in a trial, participants, quickly, and get the answer, the readout. Now, there's another form of clinical trials that have taken off in recent years that we've been pushing hard on, and these are the digitized clinical trials, where you don't have a site and you just basically are enrolling people through smartphone apps and websites and getting consent, and then tracking their data, whether it's through sensors or whether it's through other means. You can send them a microneedle collection for blood. You can get their all sorts of things remotely. Everything is done remotely. It's very efficient and fast. It's all digital, and you're returning the data to each participant. And we've been keen on this. It's not good for testing an intervention like a new drug, but it really works well. So, within weeks of the pandemic in the US, we started this so-called DETECT program, which picks up COVID by change in heart rate at rest, as well as physical activity and sleep metrics. And that's turned out to be very useful because we can also have a marker for long COVID, for vaccination response, all through risk passive sensor data that's being donated and getting back to participants. So I think we're going to see a lot more digital trials. They're, for certain things. They're not for investigational drugs, but certainly for meaningful data collection.
Well, certainly they're complementary to the conventional regulatory grade phase 3 trials. And we're certainly going to need these large pragmatic trials to be able to look at normal populations to see effects that would otherwise take a lot of money and many years to be able to get a readout.
Yeah, that's what's so surprising, Zan, is, back in the 80s, Italy had the GISI trial for clot dissolving therapies for heart attack. And then ISIS, of course, came alive first with beta blockers and then a variety of heart attack trials. And we should have learned back then, and we did the Gusto trial in the early 90s, that doing large trials of 20, 30, 40,000 people quickly, inexpensively, trying to get good international collaboration, that's the way to go. And these were with investigational drugs. So we just haven't made this commitment. The largest trial of an intervention besides the vaccines in the pandemic has been less than 2,000 people. And that just doesn't cut it, because you really do need the large sample size to have confidence about the results and the safety. particularly, when there's low frequency side effects where you need, a very large sample to have that type of, sense of real safety. So I hope someday in the US, we will get this pragmatic trial that you're emphasizing. I think we just have been missing on this, and it just has to get done.
Eric, I'd like to get back to something you said about the antiviral that Merck publicized by press release, because we've heard of the military industrial complex, but there's also something called the medical publishing complex. And I'm sure that Merck already has the paper written, and it may have already been submitted somewhere. And we, the public, don't get to see that. Sometimes we'll go on a so-called preprint server where it's roundly criticized because it hasn't been peer reviewed. The system for things as vital as a life-saving antiviral needs to work better than it does. And you're deeply into communicating science through your being the editor-in-chief at Medscape. What can the medical publishing complex do to stop this disconnect between SEC mandated press release from a pharma company and letting the public actually know through some kind of vetted process? Some of the problem may rely in peer reviewers who are hard to round up and hard to get to do their job in a rapid way. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about that, because I do think about it a lot, Larry. Like today was the second hit of a press release, with the Merck pill. Just over a week ago, it was they had this reduction in hospitalization and death, and then today it's submitting an EUA. The same was for Pfizer for the vaccine 5 to 11. They had some data of 1,500 actively receiving children with vaccine versus 700 or so placebo. They made that announcement that it was safe, and then they days later, another press release that they submitted an EUA. I mean, these press releases are very difficult because they contain almost no data. And as you say, they have the data. And I actually would like to see a requirement for press releases to be associated with a preprint, because then you could look at it and get a much better sense. They have that, but they don't disclose it. Now, the preprint part is interesting because obviously the journals they've gotten much better. The pandemic influence on them has been shocking. I mean, things that would take a year are now taking a matter of weeks. So it's been hyper compressed on a time schedule, but you can't get a peer-reviewed paper no matter how fast you want to move on it. It's at least a couple weeks, whereas a preprint server, you could get up a paper in a day or less, in fact. So the preprint does serve a purpose. And when you think about it, what's interesting, back in July, the Israel Ministry of Health started putting out preprints about these breakthrough infections. And there was this denialism, right? That, oh no, that just can't be that, the symptomatic infections the protection could drop from 95% to 40%. This was in July. Turns out every single preprint that Israel put out by the Ministry of Health has been in remarkably accurate and has been published in leading peer-reviewed journals like the New England Journal. And they've just had another one out, in recent days to show the benefit of booster third shots across all age groups. So the point here is that preprints do serve a purpose. They get out important data, but the source of that data is really noteworthy. If it's coming from the Ministry of Health of a country like Israel, it's made a major contribution. But if it's coming from, where there's some question of that source, whether there's other motives or whether they just don't have a track record. So that's what the preprints have to be factored in with the context. I think it's difficult because we've already seen how preprints can be wrong, misleading. So they're mixed. They've made great contributions, but they've also made some major errors.
Perhaps the publishers, the journals, need to have a cadre of rapid response, high-level reviewers, so it doesn't take 2 weeks. You know, it isn't nuclear physics, it's just medicine. And sometimes a rapid response is essential. You know that as a cardiologist, you can't diddle around if somebody's having a heart attack. There's other times where you can ponder the issues, but I think that medical publishing also needs to get a kick in the rear side.
Well, that's another point I think that is worthwhile emphasizing, because, you know, when you get one of these rapid paper considerations, because it's thought to be priority at one of the top journals, they typically will give you, you know, several days, and so or weeks if it doesn't go through this fast track mechanism. At any rate, the typical reviewer waits till the day it's due to do the review. You know, what if you just did the review?
A few reminders.
Yeah. What if you just did the review the day you got it, if you could,
Yeah.
and you returned it in within 24 hours? This is possible. You know, it has been more happening in the pandemic than ever before. And I think what you're getting at is you got to have really committed reviewers, and that's where it falls apart. Is the editors send out the article to a lot of reviewers who turn it down, and that's where the time is lost. Is in the turn downs. So
I hate to use the term, but maybe the journals need a Supreme Court of reviewers. I hate to use that term, so that they will get a rapid response, and they just can't kick the can down the road. Although our Supreme Court showed that it's fully capable of kicking cans down the road recently on a medical issue.
Well, Eric Topol, you are a legend in your own time. You have contributed so much to many fields of medicine, and you're still doing great stuff. We can't thank you enough for spending some time with us as we begin this conference. And we hope that you'll come back again, give us some coaching and some of your wisdom. And we certainly will be following you closely in all you do.
Well, you're too kind, Zan. Thanks so much for having me, Zan and Larry. Really enjoyed the conversation with you, and have a great meeting of Metabesity this year. I'm sure I'll come back and join you in the future.
Good. Thank you so much.